This is Simon from Red Giant, and if you need to contact me at the end, I'm simon@redgiant.com. And we also have Jason Hare here, our sports specialist, and we're going to be talking about Universe and After Effects techniques. And we're delighted to have Jason presenting these techniques for us, and he's a very experienced sports broadcast professional and has worked on multiple tournaments over many years. And has sets up the workflows for these tournaments as well across a variety of different hosts. In fact, I worked with Jason on several tournaments, including the Euros and the World Cup. And he's got some interesting techniques. Some of those are actual techniques he used on recent jobs too. And we're going to be covering Red Giant Universe. And just before we get started, here's a little tip for you. If you jump into Universe, there are more than 80 tools. And what we found is our word for the day is discoverability. And what we found is that most people have the tools that they want for their effect at their fingertips, but it's not necessarily that they've had a dig through and looked at them all. So there's a little tip as a precursor to what Jason's going to show you. One way of just seeing what's available is to jump onto the tools page on the redgiant.com website and have a look at these little previews, because when you hover over them, it shows you what each of these tools is capable of. And this echoes an actual interface inside the software, which can help you do this as well. But no more of me. Let's jump over to Jason. I'll change my screen to you. Here we go. And you should have access now for that. Great. It's all
Great,
working.
thank you. Welcome everyone. As Simon said, I work as a freelance editor, designer, and workflow consultant. And I've actually been using Red Giant products for, I think, about 15 years or something, starting off with 3D stroke, and discovered over the years I've been using more and more of them and quite like a lot of them. Universe I've been using for a good couple of years, mostly in After Effects. And as Simon said, there's 84 different tools, but with all the different presets and variations, it's sort of infinite amount that you can access. Predominantly I work in sport, mostly in football, across the MLS, Serie A, all the UEFA products, Champions League, Europa League, Euro tournaments, plus all the stuff for FIFA and World Cups, and the Premier League. I'm not sure if I mentioned that one. I've also worked on Olympics, basketball, motorsports, a number of other sports, but I seem to be predominantly involved in football. I have so far worked on 5 World Cups and 3 Euro tournaments, so I've done quite a bit of football. So anyway, moving on to Universe, there's, as with any After Effects project, you've got in the effects tools, you've got categorized, which sort of matches the website, the different groups of tools, and then like you would with any other tool, you can just simply drag and drop it onto the layer. Or if I undo that, you could drop it straight onto the picture and then it'll activate onto the layer that's selected. Or likewise, with a layer selected, you can double click. But one cool thing that's really different with Universe that I haven't seen with other products is that if we open this up, we have the Red Giant Universe dashboard, which gives you all the previews similar to what Simon was just showing you on the website. If that's not available, it's in Windows Extensions, Red Giant Dashboard, and then it's just a panel that you can dock wherever you like it. This way you can see all the tools, including moving previews of each one. So if you're not sure exactly what you're looking for, you can have a play with these and work it out. And again, they're sorted into the same folder structure as we have over here. The nice thing about this is this works the same way. If I've got the Rooney layer selected and you like something, you can click on, if we want chromatic aberration, we can click on it and it'll take us to the various presets of chromatic aberration. And just simply apply preset and straight away it's applied. So we can see that instantly takes effect. You can also, within a tool, you can choose a preset, which in this case, it opens up the window. So on any other tools, if we go to a different shot, let's play, say, let's put a blur, just a simple blur on. The one thing to watch is if you're out of that window, when you hit choose a preset, it doesn't look like anything's happened, but it's actually updated the dashboard to be the presets. which in this case is not too many. Some of them there's a lot. In fact, if we go to the classic VHS, we'll do it in here. Stylize. Down the bottom, if we apply VHS, you'll see it applies on top, so it doesn't actually get rid of the previous effect, but I'll delete that. When we hit choose a preset, it takes you to all the VHS presets, of which there's many. My personal workflow, I like to use the dashboard, choose the effect that best matches what you're trying to achieve, apply it, and then you can go in and play with the various controls, of which there's numerous controls for each tool. And the range goes on, and you can just customize it completely. The nice thing as well is once you're happy with the look, if you get something that's a bit different to a preset and you want to save it, like for example, if we wanted to make that a 4:3 look and make it sort of bad VHS, add some more noise. If we were happy with that, we can save any preset we like, which opens on my other monitor. VHS, bad noise. That then saves, I'm on a MacBook Pro, and it saves into my documents, Red Giant Universe presets. We just called that VHS bad noise, and you can see it there. The great thing about this is this preset that we've made. Well, for a start, it will appear in the bottom of this, in the bottom of the appropriate tool. So you can see there. But it also, we could copy that file and put it on a USB key and take it away with us. You can also put it on a network drive and share it with other instances of After Effects. It can also be used on Premiere, Avid, and any other host that can run Universe. So that exact look, if you wanted to give that to your editor and say that's the look we're going to use on this particular program, it's very easy to distribute that and keep a consistent look. It's nice also that these preset files work on Mac, PC, and as I said, in any host. So that's quite a powerful feature. So within the different looks, there's all the different categories that you can play with. A lot of them obviously are designed to do certain things, but I found by playing around, you can get some other interesting effects. And I would sort of recommend anyone who has the tools, which I would think all of you have them, is worth sitting down and having a play and just seeing what they're capable of, because it just goes on and on. I found playing with it, coming up with ideas of things for these demos. I keep finding new things all the time and start coming up with new ideas. There's a transition selection. You find that a lot of the things, so if we go back to Stylize, the carousel film look, which let's apply that to that shot and get rid of the VHS. So you can see the carousel film look. There's quite a few, you find a lot of overlap. There's quite a few ways of creating a film mode. Carousel's quite nice because you've got different frames. So we can go to a 16:9 frame, and it gives you this nice frame around the picture. It also has light leaks built into it, but the controls are relatively limited compared to other things. So for example, if we were to put misfire on and get rid of carousel, you'll see misfire has actually got endless control of all the different aspects. You can apply all these different attributes, so different flicker, dust, vignettes, and then, excuse me, you've got controls within each of these, so it just sort of goes on and on and on how you can customize the effect, which of course you can then save a preset. But then a lot of these effects, if we get rid of misfire and put carousel back on, carry through to the transitions. So you'll see here there's a carousel transition. If I preview it, I don't know how fast you're seeing the preview, but if we apply it to this Schweinsteiger shot, the one thing is, unlike an edit suite and an edit system where you sort of use the transition to connect two together, you apply the transition to one of the layers, and then by default it sees through to the layer below, but it also sits at 50%, so it doesn't animate. You actually have to animate it manually, but that's good because it gives you ultimate control. So if we keyframe that, start at 100% there, go through to 0 there, you'll see as that steps through, it's quite a nice little sort of film frame transition. The nice thing as well is once you put your keyframes in, we can actually go into the presets, and you can see these previews, so we could have like an ectochrome and apply that preset, and you can see instantly it updates the picture, but it hasn't actually affected the keyframe. So it sort of changed the look, if you like, without actually changing any animations. All the values stay the same. So that's quite a nice touch that you can sort of play around once you've got the animation. But so this is an idea where, as you see, it's going through to the same look. One of the things here is you've got this transition. You can choose whether it's going to take the effect. So you can see that it keeps Rooney as is, but the effect isn't applied here. We can actually tell it to use the effects and masks. Actually, that's more appropriate to the B. And change the source. So if you had multiple layers, you could actually dissolve through to a layer that's sort of hidden under. So it's quite a powerful tool, but the nice thing is the transitions. You find most transitions sort of connect through to a lot of them, like a film transition matches the various film looks, plus there's a lot of different ones. One that's often joked about, the classic star wipe. So that's sort of a rough overview of the tool set, which obviously is quite extensive. One thing I was going to say here is one thing to be aware of with the transition is because the transition has to be applied to a clip. If you want to do a transition from, say, this shot through to this, which is a composite, the chroma key of Jurgen Klopp over a background which has been generated with one of the background generators. Actually, I think this was a ray gun, a variation on a ray gun, creates this red boxes. Because I want to do a transition to the two, you need to pre-comp them to make it work correctly. So if we pre-comp that to make it a single layer, then we can apply a transition. So let's go with the channel surf. And you can see instantly it's at the 50% point. We can animate that. Which in this case, that one works a bit strange. It seems to be affecting permanently rather than a standard transition. But the key here is anyway that you need to go from one layer to another layer. So obviously if you've got multiple layers, multiple elements that make up a layer, you need to pre-comp it. So I'll move into a couple of examples. So start with a few jobs I've done over the past year or so. This was a situation working on the EuroLeague basketball. Quite often when we're cutting features, you have difficulty with rights of footage, especially if you're working for a private production company. In this case, this particular player has just joined the EuroLeague, and he was previously in the NBA, which we don't have the rights to use the footage. We can purchase it, but it's such a high cost. It's much better to find another solution. So in this case, we just got some stills of him, which the media team of the club do, and provide us the stills. Added a few text of his stats of the season so far. And then I've used a couple of tools. You can see I've listed all the tools I've used on each of these examples just to keep it clear. Basically, I've used Holomatrix, which is effectively designed, which if we come into here, you can see Holomatrix is sort of a classic hologram effect from Star Wars. But rather than using it to create a hologram, I've used it because it just creates quite a nice color look and you get some interesting colors through the texture and it burns it out a bit. And I just quite liked the look. It's a very simple trick. In this situation, I was actually editing on Avid, but I often carry my MacBook with me. So if I need to create something quickly, it's quite useful. I can just chuck a few stills in my laptop and generate this in a matter of minutes. So as I say, it's basically a few stills with Holomatrix on over the top of everything. And then I've used a camera shake transition just to create that sort of juddery movement between shots. And then obviously it was timed so it matches the script. And it's quite a simple solution when you don't have any pictures. It looks a bit more interesting than just plain text on screen. And so that was one example. Another one for the EuroLeague, which is a similar thing. In this case, I've used carousel. Well, there's a number of things. Carousel is the main, which creates this edge plus the sort of film look. This pictures, though, is basically a pre-comp of just a paper background. Make that full screen. It's a bit of a paper texture, a few frames from his interview, a name that I've typed up, and some paint splats. And then put carousel on it to give it all a filmy look. And then from element to element, I've just done that carousel transition, which you can see has a bit of a lens flare, a light leak through it as well, which just adds another layer. And then part of the reason for this treatment is this footage. This guy, again, was a similar situation. He's been playing in other leagues for many years. Excuse me. And the footage we did have of when he played for the EuroLeague was back in, I think, 2004, 2005. So it was back pre-16:9 days. So we've had to zoom it up, and it's quite soft and looks a bit ugly compared to the modern footage. But by creating a film look over it and putting sort of various other elements to distract, you don't sort of notice how bad the pictures are. And it helps it all blend. Like you can see here, he's got long hair and it's considerably younger than he is now. But again, it's another quick solution of making a section flow, and it just looks a bit more visually interesting than seeing poor quality old archive. And that was just basically, obviously I cut all the pictures in the Avid first and then just exported the pictures out so I could build this little sequence, which took relatively no time and just looks a lot more interesting than straight pictures using the team's logo, etc. So the next example was for a UEFA European qualifier promo. And the idea is the promo, if we go to this one, the promo is sort of designed to set up each team, each match essentially. So this particular one was Spain versus Macedonia. And this was designed, it's using Element 3D to create the 3D element, Saber to create the lights that sort of animate between the two 3D elements. There's a bit of Universal HUD to create these background elements. Camera shake over the whole thing just to give it some movement to make it feel a bit more organic and not as computer generated. And then holometrics over the top, which again, rather than creating a hologram effect, it's used, you can see this sort of grid sort of effect. Plus there's a bit of breakup in it when it plays through. I'll see if we can find you a frame. Like this sort of thing, there's the occasional breakup, so it just sort of brings it to life and makes it look a bit better. And you can see the glows changing. So then that would be the end of the section, but we also have shots to, it's quite weird it's doing that. We also have shots, so this is like an extreme close-up on the trigram of one team. We use all trigrams in the UEFA competitions, the three-letter code that identifies the country. So in this case is Albania, which obviously you can't see very clearly here, but you'd have a few, maybe 15 frames of that, then cut to some action and then go to a different angle, like this one here, which again you can see is the same thing. And just the holometrics makes it look quite cool. I think it just gives it another look. You can see the HUD, if we solo the HUD in the background. The HUD tool's quite powerful. For those not familiar with it, HUD meaning heads-up display. It comes with like quite a number of presets, but the thing is this tool is sort of infinitely controllable. You can do all kinds of things with it. Basically, within the tool itself, if we have a look at one, you have 4 elements. So when you choose a preset, these are sort of combinations of the 4 elements doing different things, but within each element, so we can see element 1, if we browse, you've got a choice of all these items. So as you can see here, I've used a chevron, like chevron outline, but you can see there's all kinds of different pieces, a clock face. And then the thing is, you don't, even though we say 4 elements, you don't have to use the same element. So you don't have to use 4 elements to create 4 things. So for example, this slinky rings is 1 element. And then within each element, if we look down here, you can transform. You have all the normal controls you would expect. But there's also clones. So you can see here, clones element 1, you can have a number of clones, and then you can set rotations, anchors, scales, positions, and they're all sort of incremental from the first one. So like here, there's 1 ring, and you can see the one's trailing back. Each one's a bit further back and doing a slightly delayed motion. So within the 4 elements, you can actually do a crazy amount of things. You can also parent them to each other. So for example, here, link element 2 to element 1. So now anything we do to element 1, scale, transforms, position changes, element 2 will tag along with it. But then you could also move element 2 independently to element 1. So you can get some quite crazy designs. Probably the biggest problem with HUD is actually finding the time to sit and play with it all because it does so much. So as I say, in this case, I just wanted something quick so you could see it's quite subtle, the animation, but it's just the chevrons pointing out and a sort of hexagon shape moving about. But another technique I use, which we can have a quick look at here, is when I'm doing things like this, I find a problem if you ever purchase pre-made templates that a lot of people make and sell on places like Adobe Stock or VideoHive. There's always instructions on what layers to update, and you're constantly opening and closing different bits. I tend to use Essential Graphics a lot, which is quite powerful because you can basically just create a panel of essential tools, if you like. So if I load up this one again, and then we want to build an essential graphic, we might want things like the HUD color. So we can pull that up there and just name that HUD color. I'll sort of fly through this because some of you may be aware of this technique. The text in this case, we've got ALB for Albania, but we might want to update that. So we'll pull that up. We'll just swap the orders, we'll put that at the top. So you can say team name. And then one more element, it's the saber, which I'm using, which is this light in the middle here. We'll pull that color in. So that might be all we need for this one. So then basically, with this in mind, this is quite a useful process because you can then hand this over to other After Effects designers or people to build. So if you wanted to do all the different teams, like this is just one. If you wanted to do like the Nations League, initially had 54 teams, the European qualifiers that this was made for initially had 54 teams. So we had to make 54 versions of these things, which were then handed over to the edit. So in this case, you could just come up here and we can say, let's do Italy. And you'll see that's updated straight away. If we go forward, the lighting is a bit more subtle, but for the sake of it, go back to Albania. You can see the colors. The HUD display in the background is blue. We can simply change that to any color we want. Let's go bright green. The updates, you can see instantly that's green. And we'll make the saber color red. There you go. So it's as fast as that changing it. But where it's even more powerful is once you've built one of these, so not only is that useful in After Effects, so you can do things like we could hide everything. So we could distribute it like that, so no one's going to mess around with the layers because the only thing they need to do is play with that because the camera moves all set, the animation's all pre-defined. So it's quite a handy way to prepare After Effects. We do a lot of this for things like World Cups. We build templates, so editors who aren't experienced with After Effects, rather than us have to build 54, or as in the case of a World Cup, 32 teams, we'll build one, and then the editors can build them as and when they require them, which also saves rendering a whole load of stuff that may never get used because you may only use certain ones for certain teams. But another thing that's quite useful for those who haven't seen Essential Graphics is we can export, which forces you to save it. And it does a little process where it saves it. It's going to pull all the elements in, which in this case, it's all internally made. But if there were JPEGs or other elements involved, it then asks me where I want to save it. So you can set up a path, hit OK. It's having a bit of a problem with fonts. So now that's what's called a MOGRT file. If we switch over to Premiere, you can see here's a few I've brought in previously, but the one I've just made then, it's as simple as over in the Essential Graphics panel in Premiere, hit the plus, navigate to the one, so we just made 03, open that, and there it is, and you can see it's got the colors we just set up. Bring that into our timeline. Annoyingly for any editors who work on multiple platforms, you'll see that straight away this has come in and it's bright red, which for anyone who works on Avid will be terrified because bright red signifies media offline, which as it turns out this says media offline, but this is just a case of Premiere's updating. Now you can see the picture's caught up. For editors that freak out about that, obviously this is a little off the After Effects side, but if you make something like this for your editors, they're going to freak out when it goes red. Just waiting for it to come back to life. Here we go. this software I'm using for these demos is the latest 2020 version. I don't personally use software that quite up to date because I'm worried about bugs and things, but there was a few features in this I liked that I thought were worth including. But so anyway, so as we see in the color labels, Adobe Dynamic Link you can see is red, which is what's causing that. So I would normally set that to blue or something else just to get rid of the fear. And there you can see. So like we saw in After Effects, excuse me, if we select the clip, which you can see I just dragged it from the Essential Graphics window into the timeline. And if we go to the edit, it's all going a bit slow. It's always the way things slow down when you're trying to demo it. I was just playing with this earlier this afternoon. It's all fine. And this is probably got something to do with Premiere 2020 caught up on something. But you can see here the same commands we had in Premiere, so for in After Effects rather. So for an editor who doesn't know After Effects, you could give them this graphic file. They can come in and just type their new team. So let's go Joe for Germany, and you can see instantly it updates. When you don't keep getting the beach ball, this is all quite quick. So we can change the color to blue for the HUD. And okay, that's not working terribly well. I would say though that, as I say, I was using this before. I don't know what this is, whether my machine's just freaking out or whether this is a hiccup on 2020. But normally this is quite fast, and this, there you go, it's finally caught up and it's gone blue. So you can see that a range of different, you can create quite complex graphics that an editor who has no idea how to use any of these tools can have access to some pretty cool things in the edit while they're working. And it works quite effectively. So I'll switch back to After Effects because that's still a bit painful. So basically, so as you could see, there was sort of four different tools, four different graphics. There was actually a series of about 10 for this project. But you can see the use of a couple of different tools layered up. The next thing, we did another European qualifiers promo. And for this, I used VHS. As Simon said, it's one of the most popular. It was one of the things I saw. The producer who produced this came with a brief of he wanted it to look, I think he was sort of inspired by Stranger Things and that whole 80s feel. So he wanted the sort of 80s VHS, and this plugin made it incredibly simple to give him what he wanted. So I just sort of built quite a dated sort of tunnel of the logo building itself, and then applied VHS over all of it, and it gives you like the nice dodgy edges. And for anyone who's worked in the industry for a while and is used to tape, you can see a lot of the analog artifacts, and it's actually incredibly accurate how real it looks. Something interesting that Simon mentioned before is the difference between broadcasters. One thing I found, a lot of the content I make is for international distribution, and we've had a lot of problems in the past that if you deliver something like this to Japanese broadcasters, for example, they will quite often fail it and refuse to run it because they're not happy with substandard quality. That's especially true with glitches and things like that. We've actually had shows rejected and sent back and had complaints about things like that, even though it's obviously a visual effect that we've done. Especially if you use the glitch as a transition, it's obviously not a mistake. But sometimes you have to be careful because if the people you're making it for don't want it, there's not really much point making it. So that was sort of a use of the VHS and other elements of that same promo. So you could see here, this was one of the idents for a team. That's actually Hungary in Hungarian. I like to, as I was saying, it's international, so I try and sort of have some sort of nudge to the other countries because it's shared around. And these ones here, you can see I've pre-built in, where is it? Here. So that will update in a second, and you can see here I've actually got control of, so there's some extra letters in there which we can take out. So it's quite easy to edit it because we don't have to go digging through and working out what layers what. One interesting new tool that's a new addition to 2020, which is why I like it, I want to implement this at the Euros next year, is this group selection. It's basically the first time they've had a drop-down box for essential graphics. That's incredibly powerful because we do things like at the last World Cup, I made a little score bug that sat in the corner of the football. And so the editor could quickly put the score on when they're cutting their highlights. They would type in the 3-letter trigram for each flag on either side, and that 3 letters would trigger the right flag to appear. But we had one went out missing a flag because the flag should have been Spain is ESP for the Spanish version of Spain, and they put SPA, so nothing went out. So it ends up because that isn't a recognized code, it just disappeared. So the nice thing with a drop-down box is I can actually predefine, like for the Euros next year, the 24 teams who are in it, and then the editor just has a choice of picking which one, so I can ensure there's no mistakes like that. So it's a case of sort of simplifying the workflow as much as possible. And you can see here, as soon as I grab a different group, it updates straight away to say Group B. The way that works, if anyone's interested in the mechanics of it, basically I've just got an adjustment layer, which has got the new drop-down menu control. And you can see there's a whole list of different, basically it's each one's numbered 1 to however many you've got. There's no limit how many you can have as far as I can see. And then in this case, I've got physically typed out Group A to Group F. And then within each one, I've just written a really simple line of script that says variable A is basically that layer. And it's pointing at the menu, so whatever the result of that is. And then, as I said, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So then I've just got a simple thing saying if A equals 1, then make it solid, otherwise make it transparent. So you can see in this case, Group A is at 0. Group B with the same script, you can see it's 100%. If we switch that back to A, it instantly updates. That becomes 100, that becomes 0, and we're on Group A. So while that looks a little bit fiddly, where I think that's quite a valuable tool is, like, you think at the Euros, we're going to have 24 teams. The risk of people, I only have to set that up once, and then I can copy and apply that to numerous different graphic elements. So then all there is a simple drop down to pick which team for each stage of the graphics. So it's quite a useful workflow idea that can save a lot of time. And for me, the most amazing thing about that is at the World Cup last year, I think we had 46 edit suites and around 50 editors, most of whom can't use After Effects at all, but we're all able to generate graphics that are sort of way beyond a basic editor level using After Effects because of essential graphics. So that's quite powerful. So in these graphics, I've actually used the tool called Luster, which you can see there, which if we look at the text layer, it's got Luster on it. Luster gives it this sort of really cool 3D, almost like an 80s 3D look to it. If I turn that off, you'll see it's just a simple line of white text. And that gives us a different look. Again, we can hit choose a preset, go to our dashboard, and you can see there's loads of cool looks in there already, which we can just simply apply a new one. Simple as that. It's a bit dark. Let's go to that one. Nicer. But of course, you could also build custom ones. So for example, with the Euros, excuse me, I could do custom colors for each team. So rather than where I've just gone with something that looks cool, you could actually make the colors of the Hungarian flag, for example, to get another hint of the color through there. And then if you wanted to go to the trouble, you could also set up your essential graphics so that that drop down could control what color's happening. So when you pick Hungary, it goes to that color. When you pick Italy, it's green, white, and red. So you can sort of build within your universe structure, you could actually build more essential graphics that make it simple. Especially, I sort of work on the idea if editors have to do something more than 2 or 3 times, if you can make it as easy as possible over a long period of time, it will save a lot of time. So for big tournaments like the Euros, where we have 40 editors out on location for 6 weeks at a time, if you've got them recoloring a graphic and they're doing that day in, day out, whereas you make it so they can use one drop down to pick whichever color they want, you're saving a massive amount of time over the tournament. Plus, I think the editors prefer it because it's a bit laborious. No one likes to do the same thing over and over again. So let's see if Premiere is working. We can see that that's also, I brought that into Premiere. Is it going to let us do it? It's not having a good day. Okay, we'll move on from that. But if it was working as it would normally, this is more an Adobe problem. As I say, I've been using it all afternoon. It's been fine. And now when I need to demonstrate it, it's decided not to be. Brilliant. But we'll move on. Basically, you would get exactly the same layout. One other thing with this Essential Graphics is 2020 also gives you the ability to change fonts, which for the purposes of this demo is quite cool. So you can see I can change that European qualifiers to a different font. That could be quite useful depending, obviously when we're working on something like the Euros, I'll actually hide all of that because I don't want people changing the font because they're all going to be pre-approved fonts. And you can also set ranges. So in this case, because you can change the size of things, it's probably gone a little carried away. I've built a text slider in so we can just sort of move that up and down, which I guess is more if you wanted to make that line a bit bigger. So if it was a really big word or a small word and you made it bigger, this just allows you to move everything up. So you can sort of control all kinds of aspects and give editors control of just the things they need to do to make the graphic work. Oh, excuse this cough, it's terrible. So there's the two different, so this is just another version from the same promo, which you can just see it's like a slightly different animation, but still has that sort of 80s look using the same tools, VHS and Luster. Luster again for the 3D looking text, VHS for an overall finishing look. So that's sort of a few examples of things I've done with it. There's quite a lot more. I've used quite a few of the universe tools because things like I had to do a promo with where the producer wanted the color separation, and I found that incredibly easy with chromatic aberration, which also gives you some nice sort of lens dirt. And where we got that distort, that is. Chromatic aberration gives you the color separation, but you can also get some distortion into it, which makes it look quite nice. And then as you can see, there's a preset I was playing with earlier. So when you do save yourself a preset, it pops up in the bottom of the appropriate tool. So you can always find them quite quickly. In playing around, I've come up with a few other little demos which show some of the tools. Obviously, there's loads of tools. I think as Simon was saying, it's interesting to hear different people who use it, what they like. I've got particular styles of things that I quite like. I guess it's like anything, we've all got, it's all quite subjective. One person might think something looks really cool and someone else might hate it. So this is sort of based on what I like. This one here is the null lens flares. Basically, I've got two applications of it, which we can see if I solo it. So that's the lens flare. In this case, it isn't moving, the shot's not moving, but obviously you could apply a tracker to it and lock it to a tracker. The one thing I have done, which is interesting, this took only a matter of minutes to come up with. If we look at the animation, all I've done is change the opacity. And what I've done is just sort of mimicked the effect of occlusion. So if we look at the left, you can see the flare appears when the ball reveals the light. And then the right one, you'll see it disappears as his arm gets in the way. And I think for something that I did in a matter of minutes, it looks quite realistic and has quite a nice look to it. Plus, if you think the original shot looked like that, so this was a thing, they shoot two Champions League teammates clowning about together and answering questions on each other. And this was just sort of a bit of B-roll used to cover some of the interview. But I think that straight away looks quite cool. And especially with the occlusion, I think that looks brilliant for no time at all. So that's the null lens flare, which I can never find the tools to get used to where they're hidden. Stylize, there we go, null light factory rather than lens flare. And again, that comes with quite a range of lens flares, as you can see. So my normal starting point is I always come here, I pick one that I like, and then I just go and tweak a few little bits, change how strong they are to make sure they appear as much as I want them to appear. You can see a huge range of tools to start off with there, and then obviously you can customize all kinds of elements. Another little demo I've come up with. So I've got panels opening on the wrong screen. This is using a couple of tools. This is using HUD to create this ring, and as I was saying, the clone feature of it. So basically it's a single ring that rotates, and then they're cloned to rotate in opposite directions. So you can see they're all sort of slightly random. You can add some randomness to it, so it's quite nice. And then it's a simple chroma key of this player, which if we have a look at, well, that's just his element. Double click it. So that's all it is. This was filmed prior to the Champions League final last May. Just some B-roll stuff used for the team lineups and different content. So I just sort of put this together as an idea of like a quick little graphic. It's quite simple, an extra version of his head, so it goes over the graphic, whereas he's under it there, so it looks like his head's poking through the graphic. And then this is an example of, you can see the overall look. I've added Ecto onto him. So if we look at this, you can see it's got key light to do the chroma key. We turn that off. So you can see there's the chroma key restored. And then I've added Ecto, which Ecto is sort of more designed, as you can see here, it's kind of like a Ghostbuster-esque text. You can get sort of flaming text. And I thought, well, even though this isn't text, I thought it adds quite a cool effect because you get sort of a ring of energy around him. And it's quite a nice look, I think. And then to make it all look a bit better, I've just added a holomatrix over the top, which I find I use holomatrix a lot because it's quite a cool treatment tool. And like when you look at the different presets, there's all kinds of things. You can get quite glitchy, and like some of it involves all kinds of glitches and old TV looks. So it sort of goes quite far, and you can see it's giving me scan lines. It gives you some breakup around it. It creates quite a nice look. This grid, I quite like the grid effect as well. Plus the fact that you've got a bit of a line, so it gives it a bit more sort of organic looking. And that was an idea I came up with in a few minutes of just playing with the different tools. The next one I've come up with, so this is using sort of 5 tools, and other than this chroma key of Jurgen Klopp, this is totally generated with using universe tools. So it sort of starts off with a HUD in the background, which is basically just a grid with a couple of little animating crosses. If I'm not even sure I've changed that one, I think that's pretty much a stock, one of the presets. Then over the top of that, I've added screen text, which screen text is quite good. It just gives you sort of a data style. You can see as I move it up, it's just sort of random data generating on the screen, which I just thought makes an interesting image. Then on top of that, we've got the chroma key. But I've applied a couple of things onto the chroma key. We've got a holometrics, which makes it look like the hologram, because this is a classic example of the hologram effect. And then I'm using point zoom, which is basically these sort of trace lights back from a point, which I thought sort of enhances the hologram effect, almost like his image is being projected from this point. I then have this text, which is using one of the text tools. Universe comes with a load of text tools that are quite cool, like hacker text and the screen text that we've used in the background. Numbers, which we'll have a look at in more detail later. Type on, which are quite nice for locators and things like that. In this case, I think this was a type on. If we have a look at the presets, so that's the one I've used there. It just starts with an asterisk and fills in. So you can see as I go through time, the asterisks fill in with a cursor. It just has quite a nice data look to it. And then to enhance that, I've added the point zoom again. And then I've added a holometrics onto that, so it sort of gives it all that look. And then over the top of that, I've added, I haven't even included it here, I've added a glitch effect, which adds glitches to the overall thing, which I don't know if we'll go. So there we go, like this here. There's glitches interfering with the video, which just, I thought, helped with that sort of data idea. They're quite random, but you can see a few. I missed it. There's one there, a purple one. So random glitches just applied on an adjustment layer. So you can see there's quite a few tools being used to create an interesting graphic, an interesting way of bringing someone on. Excuse me. Progresso, this one uses a couple of things. I've used Noir Modern, which is one of the film looks, to enhance the background with Overlight, which is basically a light leaks filter. Progresso is one of the new tools in the latest version of Universe. I quite like this. It's basically a graph tool. It creates all kinds of graphs, so you can have arcs, linear bars, linear sequences, pie graphs, the list goes on and on. Again, like usual, you can pick one of these and then you can go in and play with the numerous controls, which is all kinds of controls, picking the color. And as you can see in this case, I've sort of created a pseudo speedometer that shows you how fast the car's going as it sort of leaves the starting point. And it's quite nice for a promo or an opener. Other tools, so another variation on Progresso. This is a goal from the European qualifiers, and you can see I've used Progresso to make this little graph. I've added a counter, so we're sort of implying how long he's got the ball, counting down to when he kicks it. And you can see the graph function is actually counting down with the numbers, so it's sort of winding its way down to the point when he kicks it, it gets to 0 and it disappears as the linesman runs through the shot. So Progresso, again, sort of thinking outside the box, you can use it for different things to enhance the sports pictures. I'm planning to use this quite a lot at the Euros to do some graphical based features that we're going to do with featuring statistics on various players and incidents. So you'll probably see quite a lot of this at the next year's Euro coverage. Again, in the background, I've just used texturize just to make it look a bit funky. Next one has a couple of things which I quite like. One is the old shrink ray tilt shift type effect to make everything look miniature. It's quite useful. There's obviously a number of ways to do that. You can also do it in Magic Bullet looks, which you would also have available. But then the other thing I quite like here is I've used one of the other new tools called Line, which does as it says. It basically creates a line starting at a point, ending at a point with control over the path. You can pick different colors, obviously, double enders, dashed lines, and variations. But what I've done here is I've used it to trace the ball. And it sort of highlights the goal going in. You can see as well that I've tracked the actual background shot so the arrow stays locked to his location. You can also see that I've gone with the colours of the Manchester City kit. So this is something quite cool. It took a matter of minutes to do this because you basically got a start point. If we go to the tool itself, we have point 1, which is the start point. In fact, if we click that, you'll see it's there. Point 2, which is the end point, which I haven't animated the end point. I've just picked the point the ball hits the net, and then you use the draw on function. So if I look at the animation there, all there is that the draw on function controls the draw. And then there's a third control, which is Bezier style, which at the moment I've got 3-point Bezier, which means I've got control over basically how bent the curve is. So you see if I pull that up and look at the right layer, I've just got a pre-rendered version. You can see I've just bent it up a lot more. So it's just a case of tweaking those 3 numbers to create that. So this is another example of where you could quite easily save that as a preset. Call it Man City goal. Like that, and you see it appears down the bottom. And then that could easily be applied to another goal. So if you're cutting a montage of Man City goals, you could easily apply that to each goal, tweak point 1 and point 2, the start and end point, and then the draw on speed, or you could just grab the keyframe and move it, and that way it could work for numerous goals to create a look for a particular promo or opener or montage or whatever. So I thought that was quite a cool use of a few different tools. I've now got a little box that's stopping me doing anything. That's not so good. Looks like I may have to restart After Effects.
I think those are the most of the techniques you were running through, Jason, aren't they?
Yeah, there's 1 or 2 more, but we're getting quite short on time now.
By the way, everyone who's listening, this is a good time if you've got any comments or questions just to pop them into the questions box, because then we got a couple of minutes towards the end to answer them. But it's quite interesting, a couple of those things that Jason mentioned about, especially using the Moguts panel, the Essential Graphics panel in After Effects. Although it's it's designed to share these moguts with Premiere. It's fantastically useful for controlling in After Effects. So that's one of the features I use all the time, just to and make sure that I have to constantly bounce up and down in the effects palette, trying to find a certain parameter.
Here we go. We're back. So I think we only have one more anyway, so I'll just quickly go over that one now that we're back. So as a sort of variation on some of the same things, so this one we have Misfire, which is another film look to grade the background, which has got a vignette built in. Line again, which creates the basketball, tracking the ball. Again, I've picked the colors off the color of their shirt. Progresso to create a graph. I basically built a shot clock, which animates down to match the shot clock up here. And then I'm using one of the other tools I touched on briefly, Numbers, which is brilliant because it just gives you a range of text tools that can sometimes be hard to do. This is particularly useful in things like Premiere and Avid, where you've got sort of no numbers at all. It's very easy to add percentages and counters and things that animate. So there you can see a composite doing quite a few things. I think for promos and openers, just adding little lines and elements like that can really make something look a little bit different to a standard edit with no time. So sorry about that crash, but we got there. So that sort of now does cover all of the examples I had. So I think just to recap quickly, the dashboard is obviously something very useful to get used to find your different effects and preview them and have a look. And then saving the presets is also very powerful, that you can share with other users.
Jason, would you say it's fair to balance out two things I've noticed on tournaments that are key? One, of course, is the speed of doing things, but the other is the requirement to do things that aren't necessarily things that people have seen before, or to break out from previous techniques that have worked on previous tournaments. So at least you're showing something fresh.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always, well, things are always evolving up there. I think camera styles are evolving. Like even with interviews, negative space has become very trendy, whereas traditionally that was always seen as poor camera work. Now it's almost like if someone frames a traditional interview, it's seen as ugly. I think likewise with effects, people want more and more, and like especially in my case as an editor and designer, I find it quite useful having both skills, because quite often they seem to want you to do all kinds of things with an edit. But even if you're preparing an edit for a designer, having an idea of what a designer wants can help. But yeah, I think I find a lot of ideas, as I've been in the industry quite a while. I work with a lot of young producers who want something cool but don't really know what. So if you've got ideas and tricks that things like Universe can give you, it can allow you to do stuff really quickly.
That's true. Plus the ability to do iterations of it or changes as it goes through the design process. And I've seen many instances of that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think a big one there is, I think I've been looking at in some of the other tutorials, is one of the fractal background generators. You've got a thing called light leaks. And by applying that to a picture and making it like screen mode composite, it's a much better light leak than the traditional ones that you buy, because you start to recognize the same light leaks over and over again. This way you can have a custom one that no one else has ever seen, and it just keeps things looking fresh and doesn't look like everyone's using the same toolbox.
Absolutely. And also, I've noticed there are lots of workflows where the graphics department are creating, as you were pointing out, creating a graphics treatment, saving it as a preset, and then either in Premiere or in Avid, the editors are then able to just change some of the text, but it keeps the inherent design so that graphics don't have to do 20 or 30 different instances or something, especially if it's a title or a locator.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a lot of my job. I've done that with the name supers on the Champions League magazine show, automating things like that. So, like that show was paying a designer to come in to make 7 or 8 name supers for a day, which I think is expensive for them and quite boring for the designer who gets that job. So turning it around so an assistant producer can do it frees up designers to do more interesting work, and it keeps things consistent because they can't change things. And if they can't get one of their regulars, it always looks right.
That's true. That's true. And it's as well as on production, I've worked at several newspapers that have a master After Effects project like this, and they use some of those techniques to actually give the access to the editors on the timeline so they can, as you were showing before, just changing the colors of the team and it updates multiple aspects of the design without having to have a designer coming in to do those every single time there's a game.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think a good example of that's the Rugby World Cup. I did a stats project for them, and they actually had 8 different coloured backgrounds depending on what stage of the competition they're at. But then each team had a coloured background, so every graphic had a possibility of 32 different coloured backgrounds.
Oh, goodness.
So, but setting up a couple of choices where people just choose which part of the competition, which team, then they just had to choose, do they want the competition or the team colour? Everything else was automatic.
Such a time saver. Well, this has been excellent. Thank you, Jason, for that.
No problem.
And as we mentioned before, if you've got any follow-up questions, please let us know. My email address is simon@redgiant, and I can pass on questions to Jason too. And this session, as we mentioned before, has been recorded, so you'll get access to it soon after it finishes. Automatically will be emailed to you from that same link that you registered. And feel free to share that link, because if you've got any colleagues that you think would find these tools useful, then let us know. Because many of the people who have dialed in already have access to this. You should see it on your systems. And although Jason was working in CC 2020, these techniques in Universe work in multiple previous versions of After Effects. So CC 2019, 18, and 17. And in some cases before. I know some people have got the odd system working on previous versions, but Universe has been compatible for a while now with various editions. Officially, it's 2017 and upwards. But if you are working on a later version and you want to save it in a previous version, the actual techniques in the controls for the plugins will be identical. So you can, I've seen it so that have multiple different hosts in graphics departments, but at least the plugins will be all the same settings and all the same treatments. Well, great. Thanks again for your time, for spending the time with us. And we'll catch you on the next one of these.
Great. Thanks, everyone.